Alright, so if you're like me, you've probably tried a lot of different pasta dishes in your life, from your mother's classic spaghetti and meatballs to a restaurant-level ravioli. There's something about a good pasta dish that just hits the spot. With that in mind, today I'll be showing you an old-school classic that's simple, luxurious, and a little bit spicy, and will definitely give your mama's spaghetti and meatballs a run for their money. This is Pasta Alla Vodka. Hey folks, welcome back to Time Out Kitchen, where today I'll be showing you how to make pasta alla vodka, or pasta vodka, or penne alla vodka. Well, whatever you call it, outside of how delicious this plate of pasta is, one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of this dish is because of how easy and versatile it actually is. There are quite literally a ton of different ways to make this dish, from your noodle choice to what protein, if any, you decide to use, and even whether you use its namesake or not. Yeah, that's right, you don't even have to use vodka in this dish if you don't want to. But you should, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. But listen, I've had so many different versions of this thing in my life, from penne to fusilli, prosciutto to pancetta. There's more than I can count, and while they've all mostly been delicious, I think this version has got to be my favorite. And best of all, to make it, you're only going to need a few very simple but very delicious ingredients. And at the top of that ingredient list is a can of very good quality tomatoes. In this case, a 28 ounce or 800 milliliter can of these San Marzano tomatoes. And of course, no worries if you can't find San Marzano tomatoes, just use the best quality canned tomato that you can find. Moving along, you'll also want one medium shallot, and here's what a large shallot looks like for comparison. Your second aromatic here is obviously going to be garlic, so grab yourself 3 or 4 cloves of that. To add a mellow, spicy note, I'm adding 1 to 2 tablespoons of pepperoncini peppers. If you don't have these, you could replace these with dry chili flakes, but the oil from the pepperoncinis adds a bright, fruity note and a gorgeous red color to your sauce, and I actually think this is a really good addition, so definitely find these if you can. And speaking of the sauce, you'll need around a cup or 200 to 250 mils of cream to really round things out and give it that signature pinkish orange color. Next, you want some Parmigiano Reggiano, about 1 cup grated, and for a pop of color and a nice herbaceous note, you should source yourself a handful of fresh basil and a handful of flat leaf parsley. For your noodles, unsurprisingly, you have a ton of different choices. I'm using this penne that was laying around in my cupboards, but you could certainly swap this out for fusilli or rigatoni. Basically, anything with some ridges that will help hold your sauce are a very good option. With your noodles selected, you'll want to grab the namesake of this dish, vodka. Now, I'm using about a half an ounce to an ounce, that's about 15 to 30 milliliters here. You can use a little less or none at all, should you choose. Now, you might be thinking, why vodka specifically? Well, the science behind it is that the tomatoes react with the ethanol in the vodka to create esters, a sort of flavor compound. But if you're bad at science and a simpleton like me, to put it more simply, the Bernie potato juice makes the tomatoes go yum yum. But again, as I said at the beginning of this video, you don't have to use the vodka, but it does help enhance the flavor of those tomatoes, so it's worth adding in. So science lesson aside, you'll finally want to grab the singular ingredient that makes this my favorite version of this dish. That is some chorizo. Its complex, spiced, smoky flavors pair so well with our slightly spicy tomato sauce, and this protein is the one that, in my opinion, really elevates this dish above all others. So that said, grab about 1 chorizo or about 70 grams per person. Now, in my case, since I want leftovers, I'm going to be using all 3 of these, so that's about 210 grams of chorizo, but you can adjust as needed. And with that, our ingredients are covered, so let's put this thing together, shall we? So to start, grab your shallot and get this into a fine dice. First by cutting lengthwise, then flattening out your knife and cutting across those first cuts, and then cutting across all those cuts to get these tiny, even pieces. With that done, your garlic is next, so just peel off the skins of your 4 to 5 cloves of garlic and then toss these into your garlic press and give them a good squeeze. You can also chop these up with your knife, but ultimately you should have something that looks a little bit like this. Next, grab your can of tomatoes and pop that open with your trusty can opener. You can see these tomatoes are whole and we don't want this floating in our sauce, so we're going to make our sauce right in this can. To To do that, grab a healthy pinch of kosher salt and drop that right into the tomatoes, and then do the same with some oregano. Now, the dry oregano is optional, but I just love the taste of oregano in my tomato sauces, so I'm dropping in about 1 tablespoon or so. Now, obviously we need to smooth all of this out, so the last step here is to grab your immersion blender and just blend all of this in the same can until it is totally smooth. If you don't have an immersion blender or a blender of any kind, then I'd recommend dropping this into a large bowl and crushing with your hands or a potato masher. But this is going to take a lot more time and be a heck of a lot messier. In any case, with the sauce done, grab a box grater and your Parmesan cheese, and then using the finest side of the grater, grate around 1 cup worth of parm. We're looking for this almost powder-like texture to top our dish with, and also because this will melt a little bit more easily and readily in our sauce. So with your cheese grated, scoop this into a bowl and save this for later. So now that we've got the sauce and cheese sorted, it's time for that exciting spicy note which we will get from our pepperoncini peppers. You can see that while these aren't full-size peppers, they are a bit on the chunkier side, and we want to cut these down to a more fine texture. So place 1 to 2 tablespoons of your peppers onto your board and get chopping. Then just scoop these up along with as much oil as you can and place this on your plate with your other aromatics. For now, we're just going to keep this off to the side because we're going to tackle our chorizo. And don't worry, this is actually quite simple. We're just going to remove the meat from the casing, so grab your knife and make an incision along the length of the chorizo, and then just peel or squeeze out all of that porky goodness. Then just repeat this for each chorizo, and you should be left with a smoky, aromatic pile of chorizo that is ready to be cooked down until crisp and golden brown. But for now, move your chorizo to the side and then grab yourself a large, heavy pan. Bonus points if it's also blue. Now, this is where we're going to cook absolutely everything sauce related, so it's a good idea to have something that retains heat and ideally has a lid. For the non-sauce related items, meaning our pasta, we'll want to use a large pot which we will fill with water and salt heavily before moving this to the stove on high heat. While the water is heading to a boil, we'll want to put our large pan on a medium-high heat and squeeze in 1 tablespoon of a neutral oil. In this case, I am using canola, but you could use grapeseed, avocado, or anything with a decent smoke point and low flavor. Now, once the oil is glistening and near the smoke point, drop in your chorizo and start breaking it all up. We want to render out that fat and flavor, but also crisp up our chorizo. So to do this, I find it's actually best to break everything up and spread it out, and then do not touch it until you can see a nice golden brown edge along all of your pieces. This should really only take 3 to 4 minutes, but it really depends on your burner and the heat levels. Just keep an eye on it. But once you see those crisp edges start to form, give this a mix and cook for another 2 to 3 minutes. Once everything's cooked up and the chorizo is looking deeply golden brown and delicious, go ahead and remove all of that pork while leaving behind the majority of all of that rendered out fat and flavor. Because we really want to take advantage of all those deep, rich flavors in our pan. So drop the heat to medium and start building that next layer of flavor by dumping in all of your aromatics. Just make sure that you stir this immediately so that the shallots, garlic, and chilies pick up all of that chorizo flavor and do not burn. Then just let this cook for about 1 to 2 minutes until fragrant. After 2 minutes, reintroduce your chorizo to the pan and give this another quick mix before dropping the heat to medium-low and then deglazing with your tomato sauce. Just make sure that you stir constantly to prevent the sauce from spitting everywhere and also to scrape up any of that fond on the bottom of the pan. Once you've thoroughly scraped off the fond and the sauce has settled to a light simmer, drop in your bundle of basil directly into the sauce and give this another mix. And don't worry guys, we're going to fish this out a little bit later. Then just let this do its thing and let it simmer uncovered for 2 to 3 minutes, stirring every 30 seconds or so. After 3 or so minutes, the sauce should have thickened slightly, and this is where we will want to add in our vodka. Now, if you're using a gas stove, I highly recommend doing this off the heat so you can avoid any flames, but in my case, as I got the equivalent of an easy bake oven for a stove and no concern for my own safety, I'm pouring the vodka right into the pan. Once that's added, I'm giving this a quick stir and then letting this simmer until this reduces and thickens. This will allow the flavors to round out but also deeply intensify, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now this thickening will take a little bit of time, anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes, but this is a great time to sort out our garnish. So grab that bundle of flat leaf parsley and separate the stem and the leaves. We mainly want the leaves here for both the texture and the milder parsley flavor, so just roll the parsley up into a tight bundle and run your knife through it until it's finely chopped, something that should look a little bit like this. With the parsley prepped, it's time to check back in on our sauce, which has thickened nicely. It's been around 8 minutes, and so when we drag our wooden spoon through the sauce, you can see that the sauce stays separated, which is what we're looking for. But that said, you can definitely cook this sauce further down if you want until it's almost like a paste. However, that will take longer, and you could save a lot of this time by simply using tomato paste in the recipe instead. But since we didn't, we're going to kind of let this be a little bit less on the paste side and a little more on that bright tomato note. Either way, now that our sauce is in a good place, it's time to give this sauce its iconic pinkish orange color by adding in our cream. I'll be adding in my cream slowly here because I won't necessarily need the entire amount. That was 200 to 250 milliliters. And depending on the consistency and color that I'm looking for, I could actually add a lot less or a lot more. So you got to be a little bit careful here and just use your eyes. So mix in the cream until it's thoroughly incorporated, and you should have a creamy tomato sauce that is ready to meet its starchy counterpart. So drop a lid on this to keep it hot and then check in on your pot of water. By now, this thing should have reached a rolling boil, which means it's time to drop in your pasta. So dump that in and give this a quick mix to make sure that nothing sticks, and then let this do its thing. We're looking for an al dente pasta, which in this case will take around 7 or 8 minutes. And don't forget to save about 1 to 1.5 cups of that starchy pasta water, as this is going to be the key in giving our sauce that beautiful silky texture. And speaking of the sauce, let's take a look at how it's looking. So pop off that lid and spoon out a little bit of that sauce. And yeah, you can see that the color is there, the texture of the sauce is smooth, and those bits of chorizo are going to be in every single bite. Now, this smells amazing and it's ready to go, so let's put this all together. So in a pan on low to medium heat, drop in a few ladles of your sauce and as much pasta as you're willing to consume. Then add a 1/4 cup of that starchy pasta water and stir and toss this together until everything is thoroughly coated and shiny. Now this is a great place to add some butter if you're looking to add even more flavor and shimmer to this dish, but we're going to lay off those extra calories for now because this looks damn good the way it is. So now it is finally time to plate this all up, so grab yourself a plate or bowl and pile in your pasta until you're satisfied. Then for that sharp, salty note that we're all familiar with, and for a nice contrast of color, drop in a healthy amount of your finely grated Parmesan over top. Then finally, to make this thing pretty, toss in your finely chopped parsley. And there, my friends, is a tremendously delicious plate of pasta waiting to be taste tested. And this thing's got a great color to it, the sauce clings nicely to our noodles, and the smell of the garlic, smoky chorizo, and that fruity spiciness from our peppers are really gonna make anyone's mouth water. Speaking of which, that's enough chit-chat, let's try this thing. And my god, it is no wonder that this pasta has been a classic for so long. It's got complex but well-rounded flavors. The acidity from the tomatoes is mellowed out by the cream, and those aromatics and mild spice from our chilies makes me just want to eat this entire thing. And the chorizo brings so much flavor and a light smokiness that just elevates this beyond any normal version of this dish. Listen, if you've never tried this dish before or this version of the dish, get out to the store, grab the ingredients, and give this a shot. It's simple, it's incredibly delicious, and it very well could quickly become one of your favorite pasta dishes ever. With that said, I'm going to go enjoy this plate of pasta myself. So thank you so much for watching until the end of this video. As always, thumbs if you liked it, subs if you loved it. We will see you in the next one.